am Hugh Hewitt, back inside a very chilly Beltway this morning. Good morning to you. Hope your Christmas shopping is underway. I want to begin by thanking Dwayne, who sat in for me on Monday, Kurt Schlichter, who was here on Tuesday, and the wonderful Mark Davis, who was here on Wednesday. The three caballeros did a wonderful job as I filled in for our injured colleague and friend, Dennis Prager, on the first leg of a cruise he always takes with his listeners, some of whom are Hugh Hewitt listeners, some of whom are not. Mike Gallagher flew in and took tag team. If you ever used to watch tag team wrestling, gave me the tag, jumped on the boat. I got off the boat and came back to D.C. because there's too much going on to skip a whole week of radio. Best wishes continue to flow in for Dennis. I don't have any updates for you. Watch the Dennis Prager channel for updates. And if you want to send him good wishes, there is a button at hughhewitt.com. He is having those transmitted to him. They're all collected by Salem, and they get over there. And he does appreciate them. So thank you. I want to begin by saying I spent most of my time when I wasn't lecturing or eating in the room working on my syllabi for classes I teach beginning in January. I teach constitutional law, and then I teach First Amendment, 14th Amendment, as I have since 1996. But it's a radical new approach. I'm doing it completely differently than I have ever done it before because the court is different. The majority has now been there long enough. The originalist majority has been in place since the confirmation of Justice Barrett, and Justice Brown Jackson's replacement of Stephen Breyer didn't change much. It's a 6-3 court on most questions that divide the court, and most questions don't divide the court. But yesterday was a perfect example of why I had to redo everything. The new originalism, as opposed to the old originalism, as opposed to the old living constitution. There are really three schools of con law. Living constitutionalism. Here's a suggestion in the Constitution. Let's run with that. And that held sway until the early Roberts Court. Occasionally, Chief Justice Rehnquist would take a whack at, say, the expansiveness of the 10th Amendment versus the Interstate Commerce Clause, but it didn't work. It took numbers. And the numbers began to arrive with Justices Alito, Thomas, and Chief Justice Roberts being assisted by the arrival of Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Barrett. So there are now 6 originalist justices. It doesn't tell you how a case is going to come out in most cases. But yesterday, if you followed any bit of cable news, and I confess, I do not watch cable news except for special report and occasionally a special breaking story. I will go and see if something is going on. I like to watch the snow pile up in Ohio, although that's not breaking news. Lake effect snow is not breaking news in Buffalo or Ohio, but I like to watch it because I grew up with it. Nevertheless, yesterday's coverage of the court hearing on the Tennessee statute, which has been upheld by the Sixth Circuit, and I have the Sixth Circuit opinion right here, penned by Judge Sutton, saying, life-tenured federal judges should be wary of removing a vexing and novel topic of medical debate from the ebbs and flows of democracy by construing a largely unamendable constitution to occupy the field. Well said, Judge Sutton. I never thought this was a closed case. I don't think it is a closed case. I believe the justices will uphold the Tennessee statute and do so in rather rapid fashion in a cursory opinion. I expect the Chief Justice to author it, to assign it to himself. He said at the hearing yesterday, quote, "The Constitution leaves the questions to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor." Now, the more entertaining quotes come from Justice Alito, who had a little fun legislative debate with the Solicitor General and the counsel from Tennessee and the ACLU. And so it was kind of fun to listen to. But that was a legislative debate. The Constitution is absolutely silent on medical treatment of children who are experiencing gender fluidity. And I do want to let parents know, if you're driving to school and you got kids in the back seat, if they're not the appropriate age, you really don't want them to hear what follows. But I do want to go back and point out that Chief Justice Marshall, it's 200 years ago, in a case called Barron v. Baltimore. I love to teach Barron v. Baltimore. Baltimore had messed with this guy's pier, had flooded it, had destroyed it. And he sued them under the Fifth Amendment. This is before the 14th Amendment, right? So there's no Civil War yet. There's no incorporation of the Bill of Rights yet. The Bill of Rights apply to the federal government. They don't apply to the state government before the 14th Amendment. This is a long time ago, but Chief Justice Marshall, one of my favorite quotes in all of constitutional law, said that the question then before the court was, quote, of great importance, but not much difficulty. And that's his way of saying, and I expect Chief Justice Roberts to cite him if he assigned him the opinion. The Tennessee statute was passed by the Tennessee legislature to deal with Tennessee children. There's nothing in the Constitution about medical standards and how they ought to be applied to any group of people, minors or adults, on any subject, whether it is kidney transplants, heart transplants, gender transition surgery. It is not a question for the Constitution. It ain't in there. It's not there, just like abortion. This court just did all the heavy lifting on Dobbs to return the constitutional system to its proper balance, which is, hey, state legislatures, you do your job, we'll do our job. If you pass a law shutting down a newspaper, we will reverse you because that's contra the First Amendment. If you pass a law restricting the right of someone to own and possess a firearm in their house, we will reverse you. But generally, the police power belongs, and that is the power to regulate medicine, to the state legislatures and the state Supreme Courts and how they develop. And there are 50 different rules. And it's not a hard case. The idea that it's going to be a blowout case. It's going to be at least 6-0. It ought to be 9-0. It ought to be about 2 paragraphs long, and the court ought to get back to short opinions. And I realize it's a question of great interest to a small segment of the media and a smaller segment of trans activists. It is not a difficult constitutional question. End of story. Second question, can Joe Biden pardon his son for 14 years worth of things? Yes. Yes, he can. He did. You have to ask yourself, why did he do that? And the answer is because Hunter Biden has been breaking the law for a long time. But I also got, and I must tell you, it's lovely to read, the opinion of Judge Scarsy in the Central District of California, where he just slams Joe Biden. And he slams Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's legal team for sending him a press release as opposed to the appropriate paper seeking dismissal. He ordered dismissal, but not before he said a few things about the president's pardon. First of all, he said it lies about the fact that Hunter Biden's addiction was responsible for his tax evasion. It wasn't. He was sober when he refused to pay his taxes. He didn't have the money. And Judge Scarsy notes that 2 federal judges expressly rejected Hunter Biden's arguments that the government prosecuted Hunter Biden because of his familiar relationship to the president. In short, a press release is not a pardon, Judge Scarsy writes. The Constitution provides the president with broad authority to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, but nowhere does the Constitution give the president the authority to rewrite history. Boom! And I love the brevity. Judge Scarsy is, I have met him a few times. He's not a friend. I wouldn't call him a friend, but he's a very smart, big firm, big law guy from L.A. And he's just looking at this and said, this is absurd. This is the attempt by the president to rewrite history. It's his Department of Justice. It's his son. It's tax evasion. It's lying on a gun registration form. And we aren't having selective prosecution here. And you've got the power, Mr. President, to do this. But it's interesting. If you read the actual underlying document, you realize they're having meetings in the White House about issuing preemptive pardons. Those don't exist. The existing guidelines, as Judge Scarsy reviews, provides that, according to past Supreme Court precedent, a president can pardon for infractions against the United States, crimes against the United States that have already occurred. So you can do a blanket pardon backwards. You cannot do a pardon going forward. What is most interesting about the pardon of Hunter Biden is it means he can be summoned to any committee of Congress and he has no immunity. So he's got to answer the questions. If he refuses to, he's in contempt. He can be jailed. He can be, by the way, brought before any grand jury investigating Foreign Agent Registration Act violations by his uncle, by his other family members, by his business partners, and he cannot plead the Fifth Amendment. So we're going to be seeing a lot of Hunter Biden in the weeks, months, and years ahead, unless we get a whole bunch of pardons. Unless the world is full of pardons at Christmas, like snow at George Bailey's bridge. Who knows? Maybe whenever Joe Biden issues a pardon, an angel gets it. I don't know, but I'm here to tell you, you got to read the Scarsy thing, and yesterday's case was not much of a case. It is cold, however, inside the Beltway, and I don't mean Beltway cold. I mean Ohio cold. I think it's 17 degrees outside. It is biting. It is biting, and it wakes you up, gets you going early in the morning. Wakes you up, but it is biting. It's not Anchorage. I know that. You're listening to me in Anchorage. It's probably not even Portland. I haven't checked yet on WGAN, my friends up in Portland. I'm here to tell you, though, while I was gone, the market got off to its Christmas rally. And AmericanFederal.com is where you buy your Christmas gold. And I do not know if the Fed's going to cut interest rates again and again and again, but I do know that gold remains very high at $2,672 an ounce, but that's not high if inflation doesn't go away. And the galloping market, by galloping I mean everything was up yesterday. It has been up every day since I've been gone. 0.69 on the Dow percent, 0.61% on the S&P. The NASDAQ was up 1.3. Microsoft went up. I got out of my Palantir and Amazon for a variety of reasons having to do with what I cover and don't cover and how I cover it, and I don't want conflict. So I'm just down to Microsoft and mutual funds. But I'm sure my mutual funds own some of everything. So if conflicts exist, I've got them. But I only own one individual stock, which is Microsoft now. And I'm just going to stay there as I get older. It's got a dividend. It's just one of those things where you change your market position. But I'm going to buy gold from American Federal, and you go to amfed.com or you call 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. Talk to Nick Grovich and his team. If you're buying gold for Christmas, it's the best Christmas present for kiddos because they can't spend it on trading cards or Pokemon or whatever they want to play, whatever that latest game is, Call of Duty 5000, whatever it is. They can't spend the gold. They have to wait on the gold. They actually have to say, okay, and make a plan to go find someone to sell it to. They always sell it to Nick Grovich because he buys gold too. 800-221-7694. But I don't think Nick is going to talk to a 10-year-old. If you give your 10-year-old a piece of gold so that they have something when they go to college, don't let them, leave it in the sock drawer. Have mom or dad put it away someplace that no one will forget it. But it's the perfect Christmas present, and the best Christmas present hedge against inflation to yourself is Krugerrands or American Eagles or Canadian Maple Leafs. And Nick Grovich is the guy to buy from. And if you're out of money, because Joe Biden is still president, and I don't know what he's doing in Angola. He just gave away another $1 billion for a train. I'm not making it up. And he fell asleep. Not making it up. Angola's probably buying gold after they saw that because they don't know when we get through 50 days with Sleepy Joe. 800-221-7694. Now, friends, you made money if you're in the market. Can we get some of that for Angel Tree, please? $30 a child. All right, costs $30 a child. There's a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. Gallagher, I meet Gallagher at a hotel. Turn over the keys to the room on the boat. Tell him not to have any blowout parties because my card's on file. And off he goes. And his wardrobe is atrocious. I asked the audience to please take up a wardrobe for Mike's atrocious, a collection for his wardrobe. But, before he goes there, he tells me he's already got 2,000 kids going to camp. I don't know if that's true. Gallagher and accurate accounts of the facts are often in parallel universes. But I do know that however many of you, no matter where you have donated, have made a Christmas for a child. $30 gets a child a present, a visit from an angel tree, volunteer with a note from mom or dad, the present that they requested, and a Bible. Give a listen to Alice Hall talk about what you do.
It connects families, and it also gives us an opportunity to love people the way Jesus loves us. Jesus can love them through us with those gifts. It talks in the Bible about us remembering those in prison. And because I've been in prison, I know exactly what he means by that. And it's a beautiful opportunity to help people in that.
It is, and the easiest thing to do is to go to HughHewitt.com. Alice is wonderful to talk to. Angel Tree. Relief factor. Do I need it? I don't know. I really didn't do a lot of exercise on the boat. I didn't do a lot of eating on the boat either because I don't do a lot of eating on the ships because you can't do a lot of exercise on the ship. And the Caribbean sun isn't really useful to the pasty Irish guy. So I spent a lot of time below decks. Joined by Rod Dreher, somewhere in Europe. Good morning, Rod. Where do we find you this morning?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm at home in Budapest, in Hungary.
I, I thought so. It's good to see you again, old friend, and congratulations on the publication of Living in Wonder. I was unaware of the book until I read your free press article that we're about to discuss. Before I go to On Mary and the Mob, your free press article, what is Living in Wonder about?
It's about rediscovering within Christianity a sense of enchantment, which is to say, a sense of God's presence everywhere around us, and how we've lost it and how we can get it back. I also talk about miracles, about angels, about demons, and about the false enchantments of the occult, of technology, and even the emerging religion of UFOs. It's a book about Christian woo, but again, I write it as a believing Christian. I think that Christians need to start paying a lot more attention to this stuff than we actually are.
Now, you and I are of the same tribe, believing Christians. I believe you're in the Orthodox tradition. I'm in the Roman Catholic tradition, though I keep a condominium in Presbyterianism because I go to both. So, Rod, I want to begin by saying I didn't expect to come back from filling in for Dennis Prager on a Dennis Prager cruise, which has a lot of Jews on it, to talk about Christian heresy in my first half hour. But there you have it. I'm glad you're writing for the Free Press. Can we first talk about that? Is Barry Weiss just going around and collecting all the best writers in the world?
Look, we are so blessed by Barry Weiss. She's a real hero of our time. I remember when I did my last book, Live Not by Lies, which is about the warnings that Christians who survived communism have for we in the West today dealing with wokeness. I was told by one of these Christians in Czechoslovakia that Christians need to make allies of good and courageous people wherever we find them. That's why Barry and I have became friends. She once said to me, "I never thought I'd be on the same side as Rod Dreher, but here we are." Because if you stand for truth, then courage is the absolute most important thing you need. And I'm proud to stand with my liberal, secular Jewish friend Barry.
Yeah, well, the Free Press does not actually have a brand. The Free Press is an old-fashioned idea. It's the news from smart people who can write. Now let's get to heresy, because after all, we don't wait 2,000 years to debate Marcionism on the Hugh Hewitt Show. We get right to it. And I really didn't expect to be doing that. Would you explain to people how we have come? Didn't even know about this new Mother of God. What is the name of the new movie on Netflix about Mary? I don't even can't pull the name
The
up.
new movie is called Mary. It premieres tomorrow, December 6th, on Netflix, and it's a biopic of the Mother of God, the Virgin Mary. Now, it became controversial because the director cast, believe it or not, a Jewish woman to play a Jewish woman. Who knew? And I mean, it's just crazy because some pro Palestinian activists have said this is so offensive. Mary was Palestinian. She wasn't Jewish. This must be opposed. And believe it or not, this has gotten some currency among pro Palestinian activists. And it really has to be stopped. We have to stand up and say, this is crazy. This is a heresy, Hugh, that goes back to the second century, to this early Christian named Marcion, who believed that the God of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, was not the same as the God of the New Testament. And in order to forward this crazy claim, he cut out the book of Genesis, he cut out Exodus, he cut out the Psalms, and rewrote some of the books that would later be canonized as the New Testament. Well, this was condemned as a heresy by the early church fathers, and we should have heard no more of it. But here we are in the 21st century, and the very old heresy has become new again.
Along with the ancient evil. The ancient evil is anti-Semitism. The Catholic Church is responsible for its birth thousands of years ago and has long repented in my lifetime of that very, very unfortunate chapter in church history where anti-Semitism was indulged. But anti-Semitism is back along with the second century heresy. I want you to do them in whichever order you would prefer, Rod, because I do want to dispel anybody's doubt. It's sort of like there are Palestinian activists who deny that the temple is the temple. And having been to the temple and in the tunnels, I can assure people the temple is the temple and those blocks are there. And the Jews were there 2,000 years ago, and they were there in 70 AD when Josephus recorded the destruction of the temple, etc. But tell us, Rod, how in the world did modern believing people come to embrace the ancient evil and denounce Mary as somehow not Jewish?
Well, it's all part of a project to de Judaize Christianity. And you and I know very well that you cannot have Christianity without the Jews. Jesus himself was a Jew. Jesus says in the Gospel of John, salvation comes from the Jews. No Judaism, no Jesus, no Christianity. So why do people believe it? Even some Christians today believe that Judaism has nothing to do with Christianity. Well, as you say, it comes from anti Semitism. The most recent form of it has come from pro Palestinian activists who have taken over so many American college campuses, and they found a purchase in progressive Christianity. Sadly, as you and I are both conservatives, this evil has also found some traction among right wing edgelords online, including people like Candace Owens. I used to think she was a pretty sensible person, but now she goes online promoting blood libels against the Jewish people. This sort of thing flourishes, Hugh, in a culture, a popular culture, and indeed a Christian culture that has forgotten its theology and has forgotten its historical roots. And it also comes out of a sense of sentimentality. We look at the suffering of the Palestinians, and they do suffer, and we think that's horrible. This must be somehow Israel's fault. It's a form of decontextualization. They don't ask themselves, why do the Israelis, for example, why do they have to put up the border wall separating Bethlehem from Israel proper? The reason is suicide bombing in the Second Intifada. We even have a quote from a Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader from 2006 who lamented the fact that the Israelis built the barrier between Bethlehem and the rest of the country. He said, if it weren't there, things would be very, very different. Exactly. I see this attempt to de Judaize the story of Mary, the mother of God, as being of a piece with the attempt to decontextualize the Palestinian Israeli conflict for the sake of advancing the Palestinian cause.
Rod, I want to ask you about, first of all, I love the phrase right wing edge lords. I've not heard that before. If that's unique to you, you should just open up a symposium on right wing edge lords. I usually approach such people by not talking about them. I really don't like to give any air to anyone, airtime or any of my attention to people who add fuel to the fire of, quote, Christian nationalism is a threat. In fact, I just gave a lecture to Dennis's audience. As Dennis recovers, I gave a lecture on the fact that there is no Christian nationalism to speak of. It is an insignificant number of churches in an insignificant number of places, and it ought not to be consuming America's secular elite, which is its own religion. Why do you want to call it out? Because there isn't much left of Candace's argument or any of the other right-wing edgelords. Why do you want to talk about it specifically?
No, Hugh, I agree with you that it really is something very minor on the edge of conservatism and conservative Christianity. But I think we need to talk about it because these things have a way of gaining traction on the margins and making their way closer to the mainstream. I want to defend it or to attack it and defend traditional Christianity, not only because anti Semitism is evil, but because I want to keep this sort of thing from infecting the church. I've seen over the past few years that things that people of my generation, I'm 57 years old, we don't see it as even a threat are actually threats building on the margins. I was told that when I was reporting my book, Living in Wonder, I was told by a 27-year-old Anglican seminarian in Oxford that my generation in the church does not see what an immense threat the occult is to Christianity today. And so we're not taking action against it. In the same way, I don't want anti Semitism anywhere, but especially among our tribe, to gain any traction at all. So we have to speak out.
Rod, let me ask you about the best news that you know. I sent a note off to my friend Archbishop Chuck Pugh a few weeks ago, having attended a mass in the Beltway offered by a young priest who was extraordinary, maybe the best homilist I'd heard in 20 years. I wanted to encourage him because he did a lot of work on the seminaries in Philadelphia and Denver. There are bad trends, like the revival of anti Semitism on the fringe, but there are some good trends, including theologically sound seminaries. What is the best trend, in your view, in modern Christianity?
Well, the fact that in the Catholic Church now, almost all the seminarians in America are conservative. And by conservative, I don't mean politically conservative, I mean theologically orthodox. Eventually, they will come to replace these aging and decadent baby boomer bishops that the Catholics have. In my own particular church, the Orthodox Church, there was news in the New York Post last week that a large number of young men are finding Christianity through Orthodoxy because Christian Orthodoxy, I mean the Eastern Christianity, it is holding the line on theological orthodoxy, and it is appealing to men by being masculine without being macho. And I think this is tremendously good news. We've heard about it for the last few years, especially since COVID, anecdotally from Orthodox priests around the US, but now it's really finally starting to make it into the mainstream. This is great news.
Yeah, my friend John Mark Reynolds has long been an exponent of the Orthodox option, although I remain hopeful of a revival of serious theology in the Catholic Church. Let me close by asking Rod about the movie Mary, since it's coming out tomorrow night on Netflix. Is it any good?
I haven't seen it yet. I have a Netflix
Oh,
subscription here in Hungary, so I will watch it. But whenever we see Hollywood do anything to do with Christianity, telling the Christian story, I automatically get my back up because I figure they're gonna make it woke, they're gonna screw it up. But I'm gonna give this movie a fair chance. The stories in the Bible, both the Hebrew Bible and our New Testament, are so rich and so deep. Jordan Peterson has done incredible work bringing it in a fresh way to a new audience, even though he's not formally a Christian. So I'm hoping it will be good. But if it's not, you can be sure, Hugh, that I and you will be speaking out about it.
I'm so glad you mentioned Jordan. He's a continuing source of controversy with my Phoenix friends. And I said, they want me to have Jordan on. I said, well, I think Jordan will confuse people more than he will because he's not a professing Christian. What's your suggestion on that, Rod?
No, I would have him on because Jordan is an ally. I consider him an ally because as a Christian myself, I gained so much from listening to his lectures on YouTube about the Old Testament. And I think that even, look, this goes back to the early church. I believe it was St. Basil the Great who said that it's okay for Christians to read what pagans write because all truth is God's truth. I pray literally for Jordan's conversion, but because he's not a Christian, I don't want to stop listening to him.
Okay, well, that is well said. Rod, as always, congratulations on joining the Free Press. The new article is on Mary and the Mob. It is available, and his book is Living in Wonder. Merry Christmas to you, Rod, over there in Budapest.
Merry
Always a
Christmas to you.
pleasure to talk to you. Akash Chogali joins me, Senior Vice President for Americans for Prosperity. Good morning, Akash. I came back to a beltway that is frigid. Really,
Yeah,
really cold.
it is cold, but things are heating up, Hugh. We're excited about the progress already being made since the election and a lot to get done.
I want to do two things this morning. I want to cover Wisconsin descent into lawlessness and then your hopes for reconciliation. Let's start with Wisconsin. Over a dozen years ago, Scott Walker pushed through Act 10, which ended collective bargaining for most public employees in the state. And it went up to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin and was upheld. It got upheld by the Seventh Circuit. What is going on in Dane County, Wisconsin?
Yeah, Hugh, this is super, super important, even if you don't live in Wisconsin. Folks will remember in 2011, it was wall-to-wall coverage as 100,000 protesters stormed the state capitol over the bold conservative reforms that Scott Walker pushed through to put power back in the hands of taxpayers and students and parents instead of the public sector unions. An activist progressive judge in Dane County, Wisconsin, which is where Madison, Wisconsin is, a progressive hub, struck down the law over a legal question that has been litigated time and time again over the last decade and a half. It was a nonsense ruling, but here's the rub, Hugh. The fate of Act 10 and dozens of other conservative reforms the state has passed over the last decade now potentially rests on a state Supreme Court race in April of 2025, because this decision over Act 10 will, of course, be appealed to the circuit court and ultimately likely to the state Supreme Court, for which the majority is at stake in April 2025. And so I think it's important for folks to know, one, not only what did Act 10 do, it saved taxpayers $16 billion over the last 15 years by putting the power away from collective bargaining for teachers unions back in the power of local governments, and taxpayers. It required public sector unions, for example, to stand for automatic recertification elections to make sure they actually have the support of the employees that they purport to represent. It injected merit pay, which improved educational outcomes. And so this is a really important bill that was struck down. And now, when you think of the Supreme Court majority in the state, you think of dozens of other conservative reforms, tax cuts, reg reforms, school choice bills, concealed carry, you name it, the list goes on and on. All of it will be at stake in April. And so I think it's vitally, vitally important that conservatives, as they've done before, rally around the Wisconsin conservative movement to save that reform agenda. Because if conservatives lose in Wisconsin, progressives are taking that model nationwide, as we've seen before.
I am pretty sure that 95% of my audience did not know, because I did not know, that there was a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin in April. I mean, who holds state Supreme Court elections in April in states after presidential elections in November? But I guess Wisconsin's going to do it. Sorry to all you Badger folks up there, but that doesn't make any sense. Do we know who the good person is? Usually there's a good judge and a bad judge when these statewide judges are elected.
Yeah, so the good conservative is Brad Schimmel. AFP Wisconsin has worked with him closely. He has a strong track record of upholding the law, interpreting the law as it should be interpreted. He would put an end to activist judicial system. This is obviously a problem that progressives have sort of promulgated all over the country, where judges are acting as lawmakers and politicians. Frankly, Hugh, the judge in Dane County who struck down Act 10 signed the Scott Walker recall petition in 2012. They now have multiple judges in the state of Wisconsin who were out and out supporting the Scott Walker recall, this radical sort of California-funded effort to remove Governor Walker, which of course failed. But these are the kind of people that you now have making legal decisions in the state of Wisconsin. Brad Schimmel would set the court back on the right track, and so that's why AFP and others need to rally around getting conservatives out to vote in April of 2025 to make sure that we can protect and uphold the dozens of conservative reforms the state has passed, including Act 10, but not only Act 10, and that's all at stake this spring.
That's why you're going to continue to hear me ask you to go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. No matter where you are in the country, join the ongoing efforts. It continues past election, year in and year out. Americans for Prosperity are working in the 50 states and inside the Beltway to make sure that free enterprise thrives. Now, Akash, we got a minute. What do you think about the outline of the spending budget reconciliation process that is emerging? Are you optimistic that Team Trump is going to work with Team Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Thune to get stuff done quickly?
Yeah, we're very optimistic about their ability to work together. I think our number one priority now, given the news, is making sure that taxes are in fact included in that first reconciliation package. Border security, energy, these are vitally, vitally important issues that AFP has supported and worked on for a long time now. But we're nervous that we likely don't have more than one bite at the apple, Hugh. 2 reconciliation bills in a year has never been done, at least not in our lifetimes. And so the longer we wait, the less time we have to get it right. We're not necessarily saying the thing needs to happen in the first 30 days or even in the first 100 days. We'd rather get it done right than get it done fast. But we want to make sure that building on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is a priority in the reconciliation package early in 2020.
It has to be in there. The economy depends upon an assurance of stability in tax rates and a pro-growth. I'm sure Donald Trump will get it done. I just can't imagine he wouldn't insist on it being in the first reconciliation. Akash Chogali from Americans for Prosperity. Thank you. Americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Joined this morning by Noah Rothman, senior writer for National Review. Good morning, Noah. Is it a cold in your home?
It's bitterly cold, and it snowed last night, so we have actually a nice little coating on the trees. It's the aesthetics are good.
The aesthetics are good, but this is not what I just came back from the Caribbean, where I was filling in for my injured colleague Dennis Prager, and that's an 80-degree swing in one night. So I don't like that too much. No, we got a lot. We got to cover. We got a lot to cover, including the Tennessee statute, the Judge Scarcy opinion that accompanied the pardon of Hunter Biden. We got to talk about the nominees. We got to talk about budget and reconciliation. But first, I want to ask you, since I listen to you a lot on the Editor's podcast, and when you sit in on commentary, you'll be in a good position to comment on my giant theory. My giant theory is that podcasting is going to destroy television broadcasting. Radio broadcasting is going to be fine because radio broadcasting is actually podcasting first, only we have news, weather, and sports involved. You don't do news, weather, and sports, but I think most of cable television is basically talking heads, and podcasting is better talking heads. So I think it's going to kill most cable. What do you think?
It might. When I got into radio at around 2001, 2002, there was kind of an assumption that radio itself was kind of a dying medium. The revenues were declining, and there was a proliferation of talent that was breaking up monopolies, and it was said to be that there was this inexorable rise of cable at the time was sort of an alternative media, but there was bubbling up alternative media that was supposed to be a media killer. The next technology is always supposed to be a media killer. So I'm a little skeptical that traditional media is going to go the way of the dinosaur anytime some new feature comes along. However, what podcasts are offering, what these formats are offering, where it's two people talking about current events and trying to suss them out, not necessarily through expert opinion or diving into media reports, but using common sense and their essential understanding of the world around them and trying to work this out themselves, is extremely compelling as a format. And that's what's taking over. That has the capacity to shift some of these old style, stodgy expert interview types with a debate format almost. All that's getting pushed aside for a much more free-form style, which is far more appealing to lay audiences, which are, by the way, broader audiences. And cable news is going to want those audiences. So I think you're right to expect.
I am very specific. I'm very specific in my prediction. I don't think it's going to hurt radio because radio is driven by drivers primarily and people who want to listen to news, weather, and sports along with their interviews, news, and breaking news. I do think if you tune in to CNN to watch a panel, you're not going to tune in to CNN to watch a panel over, say, the editors or the commentary podcast because they're not as smart. I listened to Charles C.W. Cook this week. I think he was on with Megyn Kelly, and he randomly tossed off that the anti-federalists were against the pardon power. Well, if I ever knew that, I forgot that, and I teach constitutional law, and I just thought, wow, that's smart. And I just think people who want content are going to go find it unpolluted by idiocy, and there are just too many dumb people on cable news.
There are, and that's the thing, is a lot of the smartest people I've ever met in my life are autodidacts. They don't have a bunch of degrees on their wall, and that's what's really compelling to people, is that the autodidact can explain very complex. And Charlie's not an autodidact; he went to Oxford, but he nevertheless has the capacity.
Yeah, I was about to say there's kind of a big. The Venn diagram doesn't really overlap the Oxbridge people.
But he spends a lot of time with, and so do I, with people who are not in our business. And that's that's another thing that is extremely important, is to get out of the Beltway, get out of New York, get out of the media circus areas and talk to real people and be able to explain what you're trying to convey in high-flung, political terms and, big, broad concepts like the Federalist Papers, to people who don't consume that sort of thing for a living in ways that make intuitive sense. And that's something that these podcasts in this format really capture, that the cable news, traditional cable news.
Let's show off, Noah. Let's show off how you do this. I'm going to bring up the Tennessee law that was debated before the Supreme Court yesterday. Mm-hmm. It gave rise to 1,000 bad takes. Like 1,000 bad takes out there. The Chief Justice said, oh, you know what? Normally, 9 judges don't decide state law on medical treatment. And Alito had fun with the ACLU lawyer and batted him around like a fly in a swatter. But it's not that complicated. Tennessee statute's going to be upheld because the states control the quality of care and how it will be delivered. Why is this so tantalizing to cable news that they spent so much time on it?
Well, the transgenderism issue drives audiences because it's a very contentious issue, and it's a moral binary for partisans on either side. So there's conflict there, and conflict is good. That drives audiences from an entertainment perspective. But the takes that you're talking about, the problem is that the Solicitor General is trying to argue facts that are not in evidence. And Alito tore them apart. And I didn't listen to all the oral arguments, but I saw some clips. And one of them, he's just over the course of maybe 3 questions, trying to
I
establish the
got him.
mutability or immutability of gender, and just ripped the
Yeah.
Solicitor General apart because she's just not arguing a position that I think she believes. It's not well
And that
supported. So maybe
argument,
she believes it, maybe she doesn't, but
it
there's no support.
it's fabulous. I'm going to play it. It's completely irrelevant to the court's business, though. And the Chief Justice, the Chief Justice said, "We don't do this." And I hope the opinion is like one paragraph. We don't do this. Tennessee does this. That's what the state. That's why we handed down Dobbs, took all the heat, is because we don't do medicine here. We do the law, and the law is up to Tennessee. Let me ask you: did you read Judge Scarzi's order in the Hunter Biden pardon proceeding?
I did not, but I saw some
Oh.
talk about it via Andy on our internal Slacks.
It is fabulous, and it's only 4 pages long. I want to read you one line. In short, a press release is not a pardon. The court had been offered up this press release link by Hunter's lawyer. The Constitution provides the president with broad authority to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. But nowhere does the Constitution give the president the authority to rewrite history. And he basically bangs on Joe Biden for attempting to argue his own Department of Justice is prosecuting Hunter Biden. Does anyone believe that? Do you think, Noah? Do you think anyone on the left even believes that?
Yeah, I do. I really do, actually. And I wrote about this yesterday. Axios had a piece yesterday that indicated that there were a variety of Democrats somehow who incorporated the idea that Joe Biden is this paragon of virtue, family man, and a consummate observer of rule of law, incorporated this into their identity and are just shattered by the destruction of their identity. And I wonder at what point over the course of the Biden presidency did they get any indication that this administration was deferential to the rule of law. They violated property owners' rights. They extended, the eviction moratorium. They didn't enforce the rule of law at the border and went to court to argue that their non-enforcement priorities were actually consistent with the law. They did multiple times over the course of this administration, to say nothing of the support.
Don't forget
for
student loans.
welfare.
My favorite. Student loans, not once but twice. Don't forget that one.
Multiple times struck down. Yeah, the law has never been an obstacle for this administration. And everybody around us has seen how Joe Biden assumed Hunter Biden's political liabilities for himself. Didn't matter, festooned his liabilities on him for perfectly human reasons, by the way. Everybody can understand it. But we also see what this behavior looks like and what the ultimate end goal is going to be. You know, the polls said that voters never believed Joe Biden when it came to Hunter Biden. They believed he was guilty. They believed he was getting preferential treatment. They thought the president benefited financially from his son's indiscretions. So, of course, they probably believed he was lying the whole time when he said repeatedly that he would never pardon his son. It was like the debate when the only thing that happened there is that Joe Biden's supporters who had deluded themselves were robbed of that delusion. And they saw everything that we had already been seeing for years. The same thing with Hunter Biden.
Do you think maybe Abby Lowell made a mistake or was not consulted about making the pardon so broad back 14 years? Because that immunizes Hunter Biden from all future testimony. He must appear before every committee and grand jury, and he may not claim the Fifth Amendment anymore on all of his dealings. Or is this just the first of an avalanche of pardons for the Biden family?
And that's a really good theory, and it may be part of an avalanche of pardons. We got news yesterday from Jonathan Martin at Politico that the worst idea I've ever heard is being bandied about in this White House. And the president apparently hasn't been talked to about this yet, but the prospect is that they could issue preemptive pardons, blanket preemptive pardons to people who they think will be persecuted by Donald Trump. So Anthony Fauci, Liz Cheney, whatever, they will be pardoned of crimes they have not yet been accused of, that they should essentially
hold right there, Noah, because I want to talk to you during the break and bring you back after the break. Anyone who wants to, Charles C.W. Cook asked, I wonder if pardons can be prospective. Judge Scarzi intimates no, they cannot be in his discussion of previous Supreme Court. I don't know that answer. I'm not a pardon attorney, but it does seem a preemptive pardon looks like a stretch to me. Noah, let's quickly run through the nomination news. Kelly Loeffler has been nominated to run the Small Business Administration by President-elect Trump. Billy Long, congressman from Louisiana for a long time, has been nominated to run the IRS. Pete Hegseth got a vote of confidence from Kevin Cramer yesterday. Big deal. Joni Ernst was less definitive, but I also think open to voting for him. I think he may clear the rapids. Generally speaking, I think Kash Patel is going to win easily. going away. Which ones do you think will go down, if any?
I still think Pete Hegseth is on the bubble, and I'm not sure if the accusations against him are meritorious or not. But people are people, and the volume of them is creating a headache for the transition to a degree that is not really necessary. Pete Hegseth is not an irreplaceable candidate, frankly. So I don't know whether or
Well,
not he
no,
clears
no
the
one
race.
is.
He may, he may.
No one is.
But
Every
yeah,
administration goes through 2 or 3 DODs, and so no one is. But I do
and that
think
gets
the
better.
Kevin Kramer statement was good, and maybe better. I don't know if DeSantis or there are lots of talk of lots of different people. I'm just counting heads right now. When Kramer came out and said he's going to vote for him, that said to me he's probably got armed services on his side.
I love Billy Long because the second his nomination was announced, there were a lot of reporters on the internet who were just rending garments over the fact that he has multiple times sponsored bills to eliminate the IRS. And then that's kind of what you want. You want somebody who's, at least if you're a Republican, you want somebody who's hostile to that institution and the institution, although one who's capable of navigating it and comprehending it as somebody like Congressman Long is. I think RFK Jr. is going to have a harder time than it looks like right now. There's an understanding among Republicans that Donald Trump really likes this guy, that really wants to reward him for the role that he played in contributing to Donald Trump's reelection, and they don't want to get crosswise with the president or his voters. But I don't sense a lot of enthusiasm for his nomination. If it gets to a vote, there's probably not enough spine to vote him down, but I suspect there's a lot of discomfort in the Senate conference.
Let's talk about the most important one. I actually do not believe the HHS secretary matters a great deal. I do believe that the FBI director does, and I'm 100% behind Kash Patel. I walked around the Hoover building yesterday, 2 sides of it, because I was downtown for the National Museum of Art exhibition on Paris 1874. It's the ugliest building in town, and Kash Patel has promised to empty it out and destroy it. For that alone, he ought to be confirmed. I do think a wrecking ball is needed there. What do you think?
Well, in terms of architecture, the Department of Energy could probably stand up to the.
Well, there are a lot of candidates, but the Hoover building is right
neat.
there across. It's right in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue. It's the ugliest building in town.
Yeah, so I don't have a strong opinion on whether Koch is qualified to be the nominee, to be the director of the FBI. I could be convinced that he is not, because frankly, he has not made himself into a character that I think is an especially politically neutral, executor of law. That being said, he could be the proper reformer that they need, and I am persuaded by people in who are critics of the FBI that it does need some reform. That being said, his style could make himself far more enemies than friends in that building. Indeed, that seems to be his strategy, and that's a strategy for being an ineffective reformer of your institution. So the MAGA movement has to think about what they want. Do they want to stick a thumb in the eye of all the right people and get the satisfying emotional catharsis from that? Or do they want durable reforms? And I think those two...
It's interesting. I'm going to talk to Charlie about this and Andy McCarthy, hopefully sometime next week. There is a good argument for downsizing the FBI dramatically, but there is a bad argument out there that we don't need to do counterintelligence. In fact, it might be the only thing the FBI ought to be doing right now, given the size and scale of the Chinese Communist Party's espionage in the United States. Noah, I have promised to be nice to the Steelers fans since they elected Donald Trump. So I'm going to break this down very slowly. Once a year, if Congress can agree, the House and the Senate, on a budget, they can then enact, quote, trailer bills that provide for the statutory changes the budget assumes by a 51-vote margin. It's called the budget reconciliation process. It began in 1974. There's no reason in the world it can't be done on day one. They could be there right now writing it between two people from the House, from the Senate, and you get Russ Vought and Michael Waltz in there and maybe Pete Hegseth. You can get it done. Do you think the Republicans will get budget reconciliation done in a way that is significant to the average American in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency?
Well, that qualifier is what's the real question, significant to the American people. I think they'll get budget reconciliation done. What goes on there is the big question. The first 30 days, according to reporting on Majority Leader Thune, is that he wants border, defense, and energy in some of that reconciliation, insofar as it could be made feasible with reconciliation. And that sort of sidesteps the big question, which is, the tax code. and the tax code looms really large in the first year of this Congress. I think they will get budget reconciliation done. I think a lot of the contentious stuff that is being floated right now is probably not going to make it across the line. But there will be a big sweeping reconciliation bill at the outset of this Congress. I think that's easy to bet on.
No, I have seen this debate, and I am hoping that Senator Thune is negotiating with Speaker Johnson via press release here, because I think Speaker Johnson's priority are the Trump tax cuts being extended and perhaps made permanent, and Senator Thune just wants to Christmas tree that a little bit and add in energy development, defense spending, and the other thing. They can do it all. There's really no limit, provided you get the law written. The question is will and capital. Do you think they can hold a 5-seat majority together long enough to do budget reconciliation?
Yes, I do. Again, I think that we're sidestepping all the thorny stuff, which will go into the debate about the tax code. And you can tell that there's a little bit of subterfuge going on here, that the more establishmentarian types, the conservatives, the pre-Trump conservatives, want to keep the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act relatively intact. And I think there's an insurgent wing of the party that that wing is afraid of, that doesn't want the kind of pro-growth tax code that we got in 2017. They want something that is far more sweeping, that engages in social engineering in the tax code, that produces social outcomes that they believe are desirable. It's a very progressive approach to the tax code. And that's not a loud voice in this debate right now, but I think it's going to get much louder, in part because I think the vice president-elect, is one of the loudest voices, right, representative of that kind of republicanism. And there's going to be a real fight over it. It's muted right now, but I think it's simmering and will explode when the tax code debate really gets going.
That debate is over two provisions. One is no tax on tips, and that's a given. The president campaigned on it. It's going to happen. The second is the mysterious SALT, state and local tax deduction, which is right now capped at $10,000, I believe. If they doubled the cap, I think everybody wins and goes home. Could it be that easy?
No, I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of natalist policies that they also want to pursue, which would have a lot to do with child tax credits. But no, it's possible. Maybe they get to sidestep that issue and just move on with other legislative priorities. But nothing's ever that easy. We're not that lucky.
Well, let me ask you, Noah. We have a minute. The president gets one big swing. Shouldn't they be working on the text right now so that they just roll it? I mean, they've got to get together and hammer this out. Executive, House, and Senate. There ought to be like 6 people in a room wrestling with each other over what's going to be in this thing. There's no reason not to move quickly.
Yeah, I think it was the day after the election that I wrote a piece saying we need to have like a one-pager with bullet points from Republican leadership in Congress saying, and with Donald Trump's imprimatur, saying this is what we want to achieve with this tax bill, and it's just a couple of sentences and that's it, and we can broad first principles, and that's the place that we can start from, and we haven't gotten that yet. And the longer we wait, the more this debate is going to simmer and positions are going to harden outside of public view, so when they get into public view, they will all be pretty fleshed out and everybody will be in their trenches. So we do want to
I hope you re-up that, Noah. I'd like to read that, because I am with you. Urgency about the key points is absolutely necessary to get across the finish line by the end of February, maybe mid-March, and they've got to do it, or we'll get wiped out in the 2026 election, we being the Republican Party. If they don't deliver, say goodbye to the majority in 2026 and hello to impeachment number 3. So get busy, House and Senate. You know what I'd like to see in the reconciliation package that's not going to be there is a ban on internet gambling. I have been reading over the course of the last 24 hours a report from Gamblers Anonymous. Since 2020, Gamblers Anonymous reports, a person in their 40s attending a meeting would be the youngest in the room. Now it's the most common age range, a direct result of sports gambling. Experts say gambling problems develop over years, which is why Gamblers Anonymous is bracing for a surge from the scores of people who started betting on sports in recent years. Quote, today we are opening meetings all over, specifically geared for males between 20 and 40. And the other day I was in a meeting with a 17-year-old, a spokesman said, and the week before somebody was in a meeting with a 14-year-old. We are tracing this all back to the legalization of this and the ability to gamble with your phone in your hand. I don't know who is surprised by this, because cell phones are themselves addictive. All right, that's why both porn and attention span disorders are up immense numbers, percentages because the mobility technology has empowered people to get the little burst of endorphin whenever they want it from whatever they want on X and on the internet generally, or social media, Instagram, whatever. Gambling is now ubiquitous, and there's a reason why gambling supports so many podcasts, especially sports podcasts, because they want you to download their app. And when they download their app and you use it a few times, I have no gambling apps. I don't gamble because I'm terrible at it. I just like to root, in this case, for the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Cleveland Browns, sad couple of seasons there, although the Buckeyes will still win the national title. I just wanted you to be aware that every one of you who are using a gambling app have opened yourself up to addiction, and you have no idea. You might not have it yet. It's long developing, but it's absolutely devastating on people. And they end up losing their houses, their marriages, their family. Just be aware of it. Now, I do want to talk about there are some people who are in jail today because of their gambling addiction, and they robbed someone. But there are a bunch of people in prison for all sorts of reasons, and they have children who are innocent of anything. All right? Mom or dad is in jail, and Angel Tree takes care of those kids at Christmas. They buy the present that the kids want. They go and coordinate with mom or dad behind bars. They get a note from mom or dad to go with the present. They deliver the present on Christmas or Christmas Eve, along with a Bible and a contact to Angel Tree. That costs $30. You change a child's Christmas for $30. If you want to do it for 10 kids, the banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Please be generous. These kids depend on you. They depend on the people who listen to my show, Mike Gallagher's show, everybody's show, Seb Gorka's show. They depend upon you to make Christmas happen for them. So whatever you're thinking about doing today, begin with a $30 present or a multiple thereof. Give 60 or 90 or 120. Higher math there. But that is a great present. Different kind of present. This is a stocking stuffer. Turning Small Talk into Big Talk by my friend Jan Janura. Go to janjanurabook.com. I think I got the website correct, janjanurabook.com. It might be janjanurabooks.com. I'll look right now. And the reason I bring this up is that Jan has written a book that was a bestseller on the Publishers Weekly because people want to be able to talk. They don't know how to do it. They're not, it's Jan's Books. Just go to jansbooks.com, jansbooks.com, jansbooks.com if you want to get Turning Small Talk into Big Talk. I bring that up because I'm going to tell you now about young guns. If you know, or if you are a young man between the age of 21 and 35, and you want to have the best week of your life, ask someone to gift you the trip to the Young Guns fishing camp in Montana at Rainbow Lodge. Go over to thewildadventure.us, to twa.us, twa.us, twa.us. And the Wild Adventure, they've sold out for men over the age of 35. But men between 21 and 35, there are still a few slots left. It will change your life. Give a listen to this mom who called me about picking up her son from the Wild Adventure. I want to talk to Colleen in Pittsburgh. Hey, Colleen, how are you?
I'm great, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great.
Hey, I was calling to thank you. My son got home from the Wild Adventure last night at midnight, and he's 22 and has had a rough couple years with COVID and everything, and starting college this weekend, and he said it was the best week of his life. And
oh, wow. That was an unsolicited phone call that we've always kept close because they're the best kind of endorsements you can possibly have. And there are lots of videos over at twa.us of what the Young Guns do and how much fun they have and how much they eat and how much they fish. It's a perfect gift for anyone aged 21 to 35. Young Guns, look for it at twa.us. Let me play one of the clips you sent me of Justice Alito yesterday. Again, I want to stress, this is an easy case. The Tennessee law governing the treatment of gender dysphoria will be upheld because that's what states do. But yesterday's argument was amusing because Justice Alito just skewered the Solicitor General. Here he is, cut number one.
True in every a question about the state of medical evidence at the present time. In your petition, you made a sweeping statement, which I will quote. Overwhelming evidence establishes that the appropriate gender-affirming treatment with puberty blockers and hormones directly and substantially improves the physical, psychological well-being of transgender adolescents with gender dysphoria. That was in November 2023. Now, even before then, the Swedish National Board of Health and Welfare wrote the following. They currently assess, quote, that the risks of puberty blockers and gender-affirming treatment are likely to outweigh the expected benefits of these treatments, which is directly contrary to the sweeping statement in your petition. After the filing of your petition, of course, we saw the release of the Cass report in the United Kingdom, which found a complete lack of high-quality evidence showing that the benefits of the treatments in question here outweigh the risks. And so I wonder if you would like to stand by the statement that you made in your petition, or if you think it would now be appropriate to modify that and withdraw the statement that there is overwhelming evidence establishing that these treatments have benefits that greatly outweigh the risks and the dangers.
I, of course, acknowledge, Justice Alito, that there is a lot of debate happening here and abroad about the proper model of delivery of this care and exactly when adolescents should receive it and how to identify the adolescents for whom it would be helpful. But I stand by that there is...
Yeah, I stand by. No, you don't. You're destroyed. I do want to warn you, there is a continuing resolution on the table. Keep your eye on it, call your member, and head over to pharmawindfall.com. The continuing resolution, a brief report of it crossed my desk this morning that says the CR has something to do with pharmacy benefit managers. Whoa, Nelly! I am not sure if that's what Big Pharma wants, but if it is, it ought to be cut out, ought to be surgically excised, or the government ought to shut down. We do not need to give Big Pharma a windfall. Big Pharma's gotten so many windfalls from Team Obama and Team Biden that they don't need any from a lame duck Congress. Head over to pharmawindfall.com. Conservatives for Lower Health Care Costs sponsors this, and they put it together. And I believe pharmacy benefit managers are the people behind it. I'm behind it because I do not want to give more money to Big Pharma. We don't need to give them any more money. They make a lot of money, and I'm very grateful for the drugs that they produce, but they screwed us on Obamacare, and I don't trust them on anything. I was up at the Hill last month, 2 months ago now, and I'm standing around waiting for the person to come see me to take me to X's office, and out comes a guy I don't know, says, "Hi, I'm with," and he named the Big Pharma company. So what are you doing here? He said, "Oh, we're working on something." And they never tell you what they're working on because they're working on bailouts and handouts. Big Pharma is not your friend. They do great things with science. They make great drugs. They are horrible on Capitol Hill. They are like Silicon Valley. Everybody works for them, except me. I don't work for anybody. And we don't want them to win. PharmaWindfall.com. Go over there and join the effort to stop it. Now, I promised you more Sam Alito. Here he is with Chase Strangio, who is arguing on behalf of the ACLU yesterday that the Tennessee law violates the Fifth Amendment, which it does not, the Fifth and 14th Amendment, which it does not. Justice Alito, cut number 2.
True in every respect, but on page 195 of the Cass report, it says, there is no evidence that gender affirmative treatments reduce suicide.
What I think that is referring to is there is no evidence in the studies that this treatment reduces completed suicide. And the reason for that is completed suicide, thankfully and admittedly, is rare, and we're talking about a very small population of individuals with studies that don't necessarily...
That means everyone who's arguing about a transition child is better than a dead child is lying to you, and Justice Alito was having nothing of it. Neither was Clarence Thomas, also in conversation with Chase Strangio from the ACLU yesterday. Cut number 3.
If you are successful, what would your remedy be?
Your Honor, if we're successful here, the remedy would be to enjoin the state of Tennessee defendants from enforcing SB 1 as applied to our individual plaintiffs.
So, in practical terms, what would it be? What would you get? Wouldn't you get you would get different treatment based on sex?
You see, that is exactly right. It was, have you ever heard of the Marianas Turkey Shoot? Part of the Battle of the Philippines Sea. That was what yesterday was. And it's unfortunate because it's a silly case. The Tennessee legislature has the right to set the Tennessee rules for the Tennessee doctors and medical establishment regarding the treatment of children in all cases, and they did so, and it will be upheld. This is my new con law case book, which I took with me when I filled in for Dennis Prager. Introduction to Con Law, 100-plus cases. And this is the second case book, Land of Hope, An Invitation to the Great American Story by Wilfred McClay. Now, I've never assigned this before. I used to assign the traditional case book, but the change in the court has been so dramatic over the last 4 years that history and tradition, the new originalism, is simply what does the Constitution say? What do the words that it used mean in the context in which those words were adopted, either 1789 or in the case of the 14th Amendment, 1868, in the case of the 25th Amendment, whatever. What did the words mean? And when a statute comes up, what's the generally understood public meaning, and what's the history and tradition of the application of those words subsequent to their passage? And the new originalism dominates the court. So I've had to redo everything because everything has changed, and that's a good thing. What is not a good thing is the American media is full of stupid people. And I mean that genuinely, not to be critical of their capacity. They're not lawyers. They're not con law lawyers. They're not con law professors. There are a few of us. I do see some very bad ones out there who pretend to tell you what the law is or will be, and it's not going to be that. This is an easy case. Right? This is not a hard case. This is an easy case. It's going to be at least 5, and I suspect 6 or 7 justices are going to say, well, this was interesting, but it's not particularly difficult. The question of medical care has always been and will remain at the state level with state legislatures. We're not doing Roe again. We're not doing Roe for people experiencing gender fluidity or gender dysphoria. That's not our job. The Chief Justice said, look, none of us are doctors. We just read these studies, and there's nothing here. This is a legislative debate. That was my point. Yesterday was a legislative debate, the kind of debate you would hear when legislators are trying to argue each other out of different points of view on a particular piece of law, not a Supreme Court argument, or at least it ought not to have been. It is frightfully cold up here. Senator Tom Tillis is one of our favorite senators. He joins us. He, of course, represents the great state of North Carolina. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Well, good morning, Hugh. You got to cover howdy, too, for those of us in the South.
All right, howdy to all of you down there, howdy. Senator, you are one of our favorite because you came through when the Afghanistan debacle occurred, and you went 24/7 as long as it took to get people out of Afghanistan. That's one of the reasons why, as you run for re-election in 2 years, you can basically put a cot in the studio. We'll put you on the air every day. Are the Democrats going to try and take you out again?
Yeah, we'll be the number one race. I actually have talked to some of the Democrats that said, are y'all going to have just a little tinge of guilt when you spend hundreds of millions of dollars to try and take me out in 26? So, of course, we do the same thing. That's why we took out Tester. That's why we took out Brown. That's why we took out Casey. That's how it works. It's on me to convince North Carolina they should send me back, and I believe that I will.
It's a tough cycle. Historically, I came to town in 83 after the 82 wipeout of Ronald Reagan in between his landslides. People don't understand the first off year of a new president, and 45 becoming 47, it's the same dynamic, is pretty rough. So you got to get going early. Are you going early? As Mitch McConnell said, you can start too late, but you can never start too early.
I had a buddy of mine text me the 2 weeks after the election, said, I know it's early, we've got to get started. I said, buddy, I had 6 fundraising events last week. You take it seriously. The cycle for me starts the day after the election, and we're running hard. We're working on posting a good quarter and a good first half. I think we're going to do it, and I think we'll box out primary challengers too.
Well, they'd be insane. They'd be insane. If anyone challenges Tom Tillis, they're not really a Republican. It's a bad idea. Go to
we got a little insanity down there,
I know. But you have been a very strong supporter of the president in the past. You will be again. Doesn't mean you're a guaranteed vote on anything. No senator is. But I want people to go to THOMTillis.com, TomTillis.com. I hope you get lots of small donors. It might scare off some Democrats, realize that Tom Tillis is basically invulnerable. Senator, you're on banking, you're on finance, and you're on judiciary. Let me start with the latter. That means Kash Patel comes before your committee, correct?
Yes.
I am a big supporter of his because I think the FBI is dysfunctional, but I don't want them to shut down counterintelligence because the country is awash in CCP agents. Do you think there's a balance that can be struck here?
I absolutely do. I'm supporting Cash. I've had several positive discussions with them. I'm trying to get my members to recognize that most of them, in truth, only know how he's been defined in the press. They need to talk to people that have worked with Cash. They need to read his books, but understand how the press have cheapened the concept that he's getting to, and that is a deep state that just this week told Cash that he had been hacked and basically gave him no recourse. Cash told me he got more information out of the leaked report to CNN than that FBI agent gave them. So clearly, number one, the vast majority of the FBI are good, hardworking law enforcement officers who don't care about politics. But there is a cancer in there that needs to be excised, and it's people that are politically motivated, and I think Cash is up to the task.
I do, too. I also think Pam Bondi is going to be a fabulous attorney general, and I like their solicitor general pick. I think Todd Blanche is the deputy. That's where crimes are. Makes sense. He's a veteran of the Southern District of New York. Andy McCarthy thinks highly of him. Have we had a tip of the hand on the Office of Legal Counsel yet? Because that's where the big brain, like Ted Olson, whose memorial service is coming up, that's where they sit. Have we had a tip of the hand on that yet, Senator?
Not yet. And I think you got to start getting smart about positioning these noms. So if we're talking about ones going through justice, let's work on the AG, the head of the FBI, and get the other ones stacked up because, Hugh, it's a lot of work to get them confirmed. So I think they're smart to think about staging and max their capacity. I've heard a few members moaning about having to work on weekends. Well, folks, that's our job. And we need to work as much as 7 days a week to get the cabinet and key sub-cabinet positions confirmed. That is going to drive our agenda, which incidentally is going to give us a better chance at having a good off-year election. It's about producing results.
Yeah. Now I'm going to turn to the budget reconciliation. One more note. John Sauer will come before your committee as the Solicitor General, the so-called 10th Justice. I just read The Mies Revolution by Steve Calabrese and Gary Larson. They're both great. Gary Lawson. They're both great professors. Steve was there at Justice. I was there for the beginning of the Mies Revolution. They got to clear out the career people in the SG's office one at a time, not instantly, but replace them because those folks are the permanent government and they don't like what the new court is doing, Senator. Mr. Sauer will be before you. Do you think that will take any time at all?
No, I think that those the picks, unless there's some sort of a personal controversy in their records, I think they'll go fairly quickly. And hopefully we can even negotiate with some of the Democrats to say, let's package some of these noms that are non-controversial. We've got about 1,200 nominations, and I believe several hundred, unless you're an absolute political hack, we could all agree should just move forward with them.
Now, that would be wonderful and a good precedent. Let's turn to budget reconciliation. I want the tax bill in the package along with everything else Senator Thune wants. I want it done by the end of March. You're on banking and finance. Can we get these Trump tax cuts made permanent by the end of March?
Right now, there's a discussion about the border, the first reconciliation being the border. I think we need to think that through. I'm more in line with what Jason Smith and Crapo are talking about. I don't necessarily think there are some people who think it's too hard to implement the TCJA extension quickly. I don't think so. I think we can walk and chew gum. We can address some of the border issues in the reconciliation bill. I think we can address some in regular order. But what we really have to get done soon are the tax extensions, many of which are set to expire at the end of this year. We need to get it done sooner, Hugh, because business. If we wait until later, the markets are going to price in the possibility of a tax increase, and that's not good for economic performance going into 26.
So, Senator, here's what I don't understand. I want the border wall built. I want the Border Patrol expanded. I want energy drill. I want some regulatory obstacles out of the way. and I want the tax code because business is forward-looking. And if we don't boom this economy, we're going to get wiped out in 26. Does everyone understand there's some urgency here? The economy's got to boom this year in order for its effects to be felt next year at the elections.
Yeah, I think the problem you run into, it's interesting they call the budget process reconciliation. We got a lot of reconciliation before we can do reconciliation, and it's reconciling what is the best and highest use of our time. The problem you run into when you got razor thin margins is everybody has their own idea of what the best possible thing is. So we've got to get people on the same page to say what is the maximum return for the minimum effort and a minimum amount of time to prove to the American people that we're going to implement and fulfill the promises that Trump made and that got him elected.
Have you talked to the new incoming Majority Leader, Senator Thune, about the calendar, Senator Tillis? Because to me, this all ought to be done within 100 days, actually 60 or 30, because there's no reason you can't be working on the details now.
I haven't talked to John Thune about the calendar since yesterday afternoon, so I'll need to get an update this morning, Hugh. It's all about, chamber time in the Senate is the coin of the realm. And you got to use it. You got to use it judiciously. You got to use it wisely. But we also have the ability to expand it. Here's a concept. Let's come in on Sunday night and leave on Friday evening until such time as we've got the momentum to go back to Monday, Thursday, or Monday, Friday schedule. Look, the American people need results. And anybody who wants to go to the mic and say, I'm uncomfortable with working 7 days a week, should say that to the public, not to me in a conference.
And God bless you for that, because, look, it's not forever, but for 60 days, you guys have got to camp out there and get this stuff done, and I'm glad to hear that you're committed to it. Senator Tillis, last question. In terms of a Democratic opponent, they've tried everything against. Are you expecting the incumbent governor to run against you?
He may. I don't think so. Look, if Cooper wants to run against me, I'm going to remind him I became Speaker of the House because they outran their blockers. They overtaxed and overregulated North Carolinians. They put us into the fourth quartile for an attractive place to do business. Once we took control, we became number one or number two. We've got one of the best and most successful tax policies in a generation at the state level. More people have more money to do more things for themselves, and that was delivered by Republican leadership. If Cooper wants to run against that, I can't wait for the debate.
TomTillis.com, THOM, Tillis.com. Get on board early. He is their number one target in 2026, and we're going to defend him. Tom Tillis, thank you, Senator. Your heart can be light if you help a child via Angel Tree. I want you to give a listen to Alice Hall, who was a prisoner herself once, who was helped out by Angel Tree and now helps lead Angel Tree every day, get kids a present from mom or dad who's in prison. Here's Alice.
It connects families, and it also gives us an opportunity to love people the way Jesus loves us. Jesus can love them through us with those gifts. It talks in the Bible about us remembering those in prison. And because I've been in prison, I know exactly what he means by that. And it's a beautiful opportunity to help people in that.
And so I'm just asking you, $30 takes care of one child. There are millions of people in American prisons. They are doing their time. They've got their sentence. Their children didn't do anything, and their children deserve a little Christmas, a lot of love, a connection to Angel Tree, and it can change lives. $30 per kid. If you can do 30 or 60 or 90, thank you. If you can do 300 and take care of 10 kids, great. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Also want to remind you about the brand new book by Kevin Roberts, who is the president of the Heritage Foundation. It's called Dawn's Early Light, and I'll have on Kevin soon. But I want you in the meantime to head over to Dawn's Early Light at Amazon, Taking Back Washington to Save America. Kevin is a brilliant man. I did not know his backstory till I read this. And his backstory is pretty impressive, very, very inspiring, and it's woven into the meat and bone of Dawn's Early Light. Pretty easy to remember that, right? Dawn's Early Light, right out of the Star-Spangled Banner. That's the title, Dawn's Early Light. Go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble. If you're out doing shopping for Christmas and you want to put something under the tree for a politically interested, but perhaps not facile with the arguments. Kevin writes in a fabulously accessible way, very persuasive, very funny, very witty, and given his backstory, authentic in why he is who he is, the leader of the Heritage Foundation. Dawn's Early Light. Heritage has been a sponsor of my show for many, many years. I've been on doing this for 25 years, and Heritage has been around longer than I've been doing this radio show, by about 10 years. Kevin is relatively new. He's been here 3 years. But Dawn's Early Light, great Christmas present. Do not miss the opportunity to give it. Joined by former Congressman Chris Stewart. Chris was on the House Intelligence Committee when he served, and he's a friend of my buddy O'Brien, who always says nice things about you, Chris. You got to be careful about him, though. You never know when he's going to turn on you. Good morning. How are you? Where do we find you?
It's great to be with you. Good morning. I'm here in the beautiful state of Utah.
I thought that might be the case, so you're up early, and I appreciate it, Congressman. I wanted to talk to you about the Bureau, and I wanted to talk to you about Kash Patel, because I support Kash Patel 100%. I think he's going to be confirmed. But there's a lot of loose talk about the Bureau's counterintelligence function. When I was at Justice, and I'm older than you, the counterintelligence thing might have been the best operating department of the Bureau. Do you think it still is, and does it need reform, and what do you make of Kash as the guy to do it?
Well, it certainly, to your questions, it certainly is not the most effective of the organizations within the FBI. In fact, it's been, as we know, entirely politicized. It does need deep reforms. In fact, as Kash has indicated, it may be necessary to take that responsibility out of the FBI. And to your third question, Hugh, look, I've known Kash for 10 years. I know he's very, very bright. We worked closely together. He was our key attorney, our key counsel on the House Intelligence Committee during the entire Russian investigation. He was key to finding out some of these, these malicious political, just nefarious things. That we would see this in the committee, and we think that just can't be. The FBI would never do that. And then we found out that they did do that. And then we'd learn something else. We'd go, no, the FBI would never do that. And then we found out they did do that. And Kash understands that, which is why he's the exact right person for this position. He knows how deep the problems are. He knows within whom many of these problems lie. And he's smart enough, and he's got enough courage that he's gonna go in and fix it. I really believe that he's uniquely positioned to do great work with this.
You and I agree on this, Congressman, but I want people to understand what I'm coming from. My experience at Justice goes back to the Mies years and the Smith years, when the country was full of Soviet agents, East German agents, some terrorists, people like that the counterintelligence experts at the FBI would bring to the office of the Attorney General. There was no National Security Division in the 80s. I don't know what happened to that function, but the country is awash in Chinese Communist Party agents, isn't it? We do need a counterintelligence operation.
No, yeah, absolutely we do. I mean, there's no question about that. And China is the primary, I believe, threat. And most people would recognize that, although the American people don't think of that very often. When they think of counterintelligence, they almost always think of Russia, right? And Russia is effective as well, but I don't think they're the primary threat. And there's even smaller actors. Cuba, for example, is very, very good at exploiting our own weakness, at recruiting people to help them. And then they, of course, pass much of that information they collect on to, Russia, for example. So there's no question that we need it. What we need is one that's focused on catching foreign spies, not political opponents. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last 6-8 years now is that they've lost complete sight of their real mission.
Yeah, Congressman, my new catchphrase is, and it's drawn from the long-standing agreement that we need civilian control of the military. We need civilian control of the Bureau. There are a lot of great G-men and G-women, but I'm not sure about the top floor of the Hoover Building or anyone in the Hoover Building anymore. When I say civilian control of the Bureau, I mean, I want outsiders. I thought Christopher Wray was going to do that. I don't think he's been captured. I just think he's been overwhelmed. What do you think?
Yeah, Christopher Wray, I don't, as you say, I don't think he's captured, but he's an institutionalist. I mean, in my opinion, his priorities are to the organization and no longer to the American people. And to your point about oversight, it's a really, really good point. And I can't tell you how many times we would ask for information from the FBI, and they would either just tell us no, or in some cases, they would open a case and then say, oh, no, we can't tell you that because it's an ongoing investigation. They would do that again and again, create an investigation in order to deny us information. Or in some cases, they'd say, okay, we'll share it with you, give us 6 months. And in 6 months, we'd get a documents that were so heavily redacted you couldn't read anything. And we'd approach them again and they say, okay, well, give us another couple months. And, 2 years later, we still don't have the information we're looking for. Look, these guys have enormous power. They have enormous capability. You can't give them that kind of capability and then say, hey, go do what you want. We trust you. A government agency would never do anything they shouldn't do, right? So, we trust you guys. You can't give them that kind of power and not provide oversight and not provide, some kind of enforceable mechanism to where civilians and people who are representing the people actually have the ability to know and to bridle what the FBI might be doing. And last point, Hugh, your point about the top floor of the Hoover Building. I mean, look, I have people in my family who are FBI agents. I love them. I respect them, and I completely respect the work that they do and most of their peers. But unfortunately, the leadership of the FBI has in some way gone astray. Some of those people are still there. Once again, that's why cash is so important, and to have other strong leaders who represent Trump and represent the American people now.
Now, help me understand something, Congressman. At Justice, when Pam Bondi gets there, she gets John Sauer as her Solicitor General. She gets Todd Blanche as her deputy. There are a bunch of divisions like civil rights and antitrust and natural resources and national security. They will get political appointees. When Cash shows up at the Bureau, does he get to bring anybody with him, or is he up there alone?
No, he has some latitude certainly in people that he can bring with him. There are executive positions within that office that he can fill. Now, there's not many, and his team is going to have to be tight. But I think the key for them is to identify people within the bureau who feel the same way that they do, and that is, hey, we've lost our way, we've lost the trust of the American people, and there are agents, there are some senior agents, field offices, for example, who feel that way. They know that they've lost the trust of the American people. They know that they're known for going after Catholics and parents instead of going after criminals. And I think one of the challenges Cash is going to have, and the others with him, is again to identify those people and to promote them and to bring them into their circle of leadership. But again, there are people like that there. They're embarrassed by what they see within their own bureau. If going back to my military days, Abu Ghraib, you may remember that. I mean, those of us in the military, when we saw those abuses, we wanted them to be fixed. We wanted people to be held accountable. We didn't want that to be the narrative of the military. And there are FBI agents who feel exactly the same way. And hopefully, again, Cash is able to identify them and to take advantage.
Help us out here. There is, of course, there's Main Justice, the Hoover Building, the ugliest building in Washington. I walked past it yesterday. And Patel has said he wants to shrink the number of people there, and that's good. How do you know who the special agents in charge around the United States are that you can rely on? And should you move them all, like the U.S. attorneys all leave and are replaced? Should the SICs all be moved and at least put in the new circumstances where they can be evaluated on against a fresh background?
Yeah. Well, I think as a minimum, you've got to do what you suggested at the end, and that is have an evaluation of them all. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. I mean, the FBI director, he serves at the will of the president, and he represents that president's priorities when it comes to law enforcement. And it's fair, and by the way, this is broadly true as well, that it's fair that those people be supporters of the agenda. I mean, a lot of people who have been nominated to the president's cabinet are criticized in the media of being loyalists. Well, they should be loyalists. They should be people who support this agenda. They should be people who support the mandate that the president received in the last election. I mean, why is that a bad thing? I mean, why could you presume that you'd want someone in there who's going to oppose the president who was just
And we
elected?
should not be
by the-
ambushing the president. James Comey, John Brennan, and James Clapper ambushed the president-elect in Trump Tower, and then the FBI ambushed Michael Flynn in his office at the West Wing. That just is a
100%.
scandal that haunts me.
100%. And here's the only thing you need to know about James Comey. When he was interviewed under oath in about 2.5 hours, 256 times he said, "I don't remember." Who believes that, right?
Nobody.
Who believes that he just and any other witness, by the way, who said that, they would have repercussions regarding that. You can't just go on the witness stand and pretend you don't remember. Those individuals that you mentioned, and I've interacted with them many, many times, what they did at that time, it will take decades to rebuild the trust within the CIA.
It's the same thing with the public health authorities. When you do something like that, it is forever in the repair.
Yep, no doubt about it. I mean, who would have dreamed 5 years ago that people wouldn't trust the CDC anymore? But it turns out that if you lie to the American people and you're not honest with them and then you try to manipulate them, you lose their trust, and it takes a long time to rebuild that, if you ever can. And it takes a huge
That's why I
effort to
think
rebuild.
Kash Patel and Jay Bhattacharya are two sides of the same coin, which is change is coming and it's needed. I want to thank you, Chris Stewart, now over at Capitol, Skyline Capital. I appreciate you taking the time with me this morning because you actually know of which you speak. And thank you. I'll call you Major. Thank you, Major.
There you go. Thanks,
Chris
sir.
Stewart. Great friend of the program, great friend of my friend Robert O'Brien, and bringing us the truth. I want to take just one more moment to remind everyone what we are doing with Angel Tree. And that's because I was off the air for a few days covering for Dennis on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week. Happy to do that. Dennis is making progress, and people will keep. I don't speak on behalf of that. That's up to the Dennis people, and Dennis will tell you what he wants you to know when he wants you to know it. But I want you to know that Angel Tree is close to his heart, it's close to Gallagher's heart, it's close to my heart, because we've been on church patios for the past many years, and we know that they deliver the present, the Bible, the relationship, and most especially on Christmas morning, handwritten note from mom or dad, or sometimes both parents are in jail or in prison, and they've been there for a while, and Christmas can be pretty bleak, but you can turn that around. They will take care of as many children as we have donations in increments of $30. So if you can send $30, we take care of one kid. If you can send 62 kids, all right, you Steelers fans, 90 is 3 kids. And if you want to make it easy on yourself, 10 is 300. A $300 donation takes care of 10 children of prisoners at Christmas. Just think about that coming up. It's not too far away, 20 days away here. Go get busy. Thank you for helping us. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com for Angel Tree. Senator John Cornyn of Texas is one of our favorite senators, great friend of the program. He is on Senate Finance Committee, Senate Intel Committee, Senate Judiciary Committee. Good morning, Senator. Merry Christmas to you. Where do we find you today? Are you in town or are you in Texas?
No, I'm in Washington, D.C. We're still voting on some of these terrible nominees that President Biden has recommended for the federal bench, but we're almost through. We got to keep the government running, so we've got a deadline of about 2 weeks to do that. Got to pass a defense authorization bill, and unfortunately, due to the way Senator Schumer has mishandled the agenda, we are not doing important things like passing a farm bill, among other things.
Now, Senator, I want to ask you about 2 things specifically. One is Kash Patel's nomination for the Bureau because you're on Intel and Judiciary, and the other is budget reconciliation because you've been the whip, you've been around for a long time. First of all, will Kash Patel be confirmed, as I expect he will be, but you're the guy who knows. What do you think?
Yes, he will be. People I have great respect for, people like Trey Gowdy, have recommended him highly. I'm still looking to schedule a meeting with Kash, but I think, certainly has vast experience, including working on the House Intelligence Committee on the Russiagate scam. and the Steele dossier scandal. So look forward to meeting with him. I met with Pam Bondi, the next Attorney General, yesterday. She speaks highly of him. So people I know and who I trust speak well of him, and I'm looking forward to meeting with him.
That is great news. Now, on the question of budget reconciliation, Senator, it's complicated, but I want it to be big. I want the tax cuts made permanent. I want the border fixed. I want energy loosened up. When do you think we'll see a budget resolution that the House and the Senate can agree to in the first of the trailer bills?
Ideally, before the President Trump is sworn into office on January the 20th. As you may recall, that's what we did in 2017 when we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We actually passed a budget resolution, which is a prerequisite to reconciliation and actually doing the tax reform that we did. But I think we have a generational opportunity here, Hugh, to deal with two of our biggest problems in America. One is our incredible debt, which is threatening our economy and our prosperity, but also our ability to defend ourselves and our allies around the world, and reestablish what Ronald Reagan preached was peace through strength. We've got a very dangerous time now where both of those challenges, both of those problems are intersecting. And my personal goal, in addition to the ones you mentioned, is going to be to deal with both of those.
Now, how long do you think it will actually take? Because it seems to me that the negotiations between the House and the Senate with representation from the president-elect ought to be underway already. Do you think they are?
Yeah, they are. There's three groups that need to be aligned. One is we need to be aligned with the Trump transition to understand what their priorities are. But then, of course, Speaker Johnson has a very thin majority in the House, and they're basically going to have to get everybody on board because this is a party line vote exercise. And, of course, we have a little bit more of a cushion here in the Senate. I think, as you said at the beginning, this is a complex process. And this is really the last opportunity I think we're going to have in a very long time to do some very important things. And so I think the process of trying to get everybody aligned so we can get that budget resolution passed at the first part of January is a little messy, but this is we'll get there.
Boy, it's so urgent because if we want the economy to boom and productivity to increase and therefore inflation to decrease, we need that budget resolution first, right? That unlocks everything.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I was whip and the chief vote counter for Republicans back in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act era, and I sort of look at this in a very basic way. How do we get the 51 votes we need in the Senate? How do we get the majority vote in the House? And how do we get concurrence with the president, who's won an impressive election victory and gotten quite a mandate. We're scrambling a little bit, but I think that's normal. We'll get our act together. We'll get on the same page, I am confident, by the turn of the year.
Okay, last question has to do with the House, not your chamber. But you're right. We got a 5-person majority there. You can have two people decide they want to take a walk on this, and they'll get primaried. But do they understand? Would they miss this door? Would they walk past this door?
Yeah, I think part of the problem I've seen in the House is some of those folks look at problems through a soda straw, and they don't really see the overall larger context. And what I'm going to try to do, and I'm confident what the president and John Thune and others and Mike Johnson are going to try to do, is emphasize to them this is a once-in-a-generational opportunity. If we miss this opportunity, shame on us. And so I'm confident that we won't, and that we will come together and pass a budget resolution and do the sorts of things which will, as you point out, unleash American prosperity and peace through strength.
It's all about that budget resolution, and you're right about the military rebuild as well, as always. Senator John Cornyn, great to talk to you. Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. I'll see you around town. Bundle up, because, man, it's bitter outside. I'll be back tomorrow, America.